Okay, sun's out, gums out, guns out. Well, hello, BFOD squad. Welcome back. The old barrel full of Daryl, season 2, episode 22. Hey, is that a prime number? What do you think? No, it is divisible by 2. Okay, so this is the spot where I discuss for you music, movies, provide some mirth, as well as some other funky ass shit. As a reminder, I created that booklet titled Tales from Scratch Ankle, and it introduces most of the sponsors that you hear from there. And you guys know me, it's this little booklet, it's a treat. You can expect some fun and entertainment. And also have merch if you care to get a BFOD t-shirt or a BFOD coffee cup. And I also have the site is called tpublic.com. And other than the BFOD logo, I also have some other delectable designs to delight you. So give it a visit. See what you think. I've left a link to both sides in the episode for the booklet and for the merch. All right then. Last week, mystery movie quote. I'll have what she's having. Now that's a pretty famous quote, and it's from the movie When Harry Met Sally. And Meg Ryan plays Sally, and Billy Crystal plays Harry, and they're sitting in a deli, and they're discussing fake orgasms. And to prove a point, Meg Ryan, Sally, does a fake orgasm right there in the deli. And the lady next to them is watching, and the waiter asks what she would like, and she says, I'll have what she's having. Okay, mystery music lyric. Does anybody here remember Vera Lynn? Does anybody here remember Vera Lynn? We'll talk about that one next week. Okay, music. Joe Walsh. Wow. He's a guitarist. A superb guitarist. He's a guitarist. And he's known best for being a member of the band Eagles. But he had a successful solo career both before and after the Eagles. More on that in a minute or 5. He was born as Joseph Woodward Fiddler in Wichita, Kansas in 1947. And in 1949, when Joe was 20 months old, his father, who was a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, died in a mid-air collision in Okinawa. And when Joe turned 5, his mother, who was a classically trained pianist, she remarried, and Joe was renamed to Joseph Fiddler Walsh. So he kept his dad's name and his stepdad's name. He got his first guitar at the age of 10, and he taught himself how to play it. And he decided to pursue a career as a guitarist. Well, after high school, he attended Kent State University, and he was present during the Kent State Massacre in 1970. You guys familiar with that? I'm not going to delve into it. Now, this affected him profoundly, and he decided that he didn't need a degree after all. But while he was there, he was in a band in Cleveland named the Measles, and they recorded several songs for a local label. Now, from 1968 to 1971, he was the lead guitarist for the band James Gang. In 1968, they opened for the band Cream, and that's Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker, a trio, very popular, several hits. But they opened for them. I'll have to discuss Cream in a future episode. Maybe I'll discuss Eric Clapton and include his time with Cream. Now, in 1969, James Gang released their first album titled Your Album, Y-E-R album, which gave them a couple of hits. And two of the songs were used in a Western film titled Zachariah. Now, they soon opened a show for The Who, and Pete Townsend was impressed with Joe Walsh, and he invited the James Gang to open for The Who on a subsequent European tour. Wow. By the way, Joe became good friends with Pete Townsend and The Who's drummer, Keith Moon. Wild man. Now, Joe, he was a heavy partier of alcohol, drugs, as was Pete and Keith Moon. Now, they famously and unapologetically destroyed hotel rooms. In fact, Joe carried a chainsaw with him on tour, and he would cut up the furniture in the hotel room. He was also a friend of John Belushi, and both Keith Moon and John Belushi died, I don't know, 30 years old, something like that. Overdoses. Yeah. So in 1970 and 1971, James Gang released two albums. The James Gang Rides Again and Thirds. And it garnered them with two hits, Funk 49 and Walk Away. Funk 49 is one of my oh my, it's one of my favorites. One of my fucking favorites, yeah. And after releasing the album, both these albums, James Gang did a concert live at Carnegie Hall. And after that, Joe left the band due to their limitations. Now, in 1971, Joe moved to Colorado and formed the band Barnstorm and released their eponymous album in 1972, Barnstorm. Now, at this time, Joe took a cue from Pete Townsend and used a synthesizer on several songs. He also experimented with slide guitar, effects pedals, fuzz box, talk box, and keyboards. Now, this album was a critical success, but not a commercial one. So in 1973, they released the album The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get. Yep, that's the title. The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get. And this was marketed under Joe Walsh's name, but it was officially a Barnstorm album. And this was their commercial breakthrough. And the song Rocky Mountain Way received heavy, heavy airplay. I recall hearing it just like every other song. Certainly you guys know about the song, right? Well, Barnstorm broke up in 1974, and Joe continued as a solo artist and a studio musician. And during this time, Duane Allman of the Allman Brothers, another great band, taught Joe his slide technique, slide guitar. And as I said earlier, from 1975 to 1980, Joe was a member of the band Eagles. but this is not about them. So over the years, Joe has released 11 solo studio albums. Notably, But Serious Folks, that's an album, But Seriously Folks, contains the hit single Life's Been Good, which is a comic depiction of rock stardom. Great song. Then the album There Goes the Neighborhood spawned the hit single The Life of Illusion. It's also one of my favorites. And it was used in the opening credits for the movie The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and it's the first song on the soundtrack. Joe also toured with Ringo Starr and his all-star band in 1989 and 1992. And this is cool. In 1998, ABC TV wanted a classic rock song for their Monday Night Football program. And they asked Joe to rewrite the lyrics of Rocky Mountain Way to Rocky Mountain Elway, Elway being the quarterback at the time, which he did. And he appeared in the video for it. A few other factoids. Joe dated Stevie Nicks for 3 years, and their heavy use of cocaine eventually made Joe leave her, as he said it was the only way out. One of them was going to die. And at one party, they were fighting, and she told him to leave, and she yelled, "Don't come around here no more." And Tom Petty picked up on that, and he wrote his hit song, "Don't Come Around Here No More." In 1975, when he was in Colorado, his 3-year-old daughter, Emma, died in a car crash while being taken to nursery school. And this inspired the track Emma Song on the album So What. He called the album So What, as it's like, oh, this happened to me. And he's like, so what? My daughter's dead. But he placed a drinking fountain and a memorial plaque at the North Boulder Park where she used to play. So be sure to hit up the playlist. Got some good songs on there from Joe, as well as many others, as you know. And now it's time for a word from our sponsor. I'll be right back. Well, howdy, everybody. This is Ernest T. Bass talking at you again from Scratch Ankle, Alabama. And I got an update on that golf girl. And she turned out to be as nice as she was pretty. And her name is Luann. And we met up outside of the Piggly Wiggly. And we walked down Main Street for some ice cream. Well, we turned a corner, and right in front of us was that dadgum weird squirrel with rabbit ears, rabbit tail, and rabbit paws. Oh my God. We both just about shit our pants. And we gasped, and we looked around, and we looked up, and damn it, if there wasn't another one of them just down the block a little bit. 2 of them. I had to ask Luann if she was seeing them too. And she stuttered and said, yeah. So we both turned around and went to the police chief about it, but he was out of his office, and I borrowed Luann's pen and wrote a note, and I left it on the door. I wish he'd have been there, 'cause ain't nobody gonna believe this shit. Anywho, the specials this week are turnip greens at $4, head cheese at $3 a pack, and chicken hearts at $1 a pound. So come on down to the Piggly Wiggly and get you some good victuals. Bye for now. And we're back. Movie. No, as it says in the title of the show, the movie is Joe Dirt. It's an American comedy film released in 2001, directed by Denny Gordon in her directorial debut. David Spade is the titular character. I like the word titular. Yeah. Dennis Miller, he plays a talk radio host. Christopher Walken, one of my favorite actors, he plays an ex-mobster who's in witness protection. Now, the beautiful Brittany Daniel plays as Joe's love interest, and the sexy Jamie Presley is there as a one-night stand. Eric Persullivan is young Joe. Now, he played Dewey in the TV show Malcolm in the Middle, and he still looks much like Dewey in this movie. Yeah. And it also stars Kid Rock, and he's kind of a asshole bully who's jealous of Joe. Okay, so it got negative critical reception, but it had modest financial success. But it has become a cult classic. Now, it also has a very classic soundtrack. My buddy Dustin, he sent me a link to the soundtrack, which really I had never, I'd seen this movie several times, but I'd never seen or listened to the soundtrack. And it's it's an incredible soundtrack. Here are some of the artists on it: Leonard Skinner, Eddie Money, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Ted Nugent, George Thorogood, Blue Oyster Cult, Cheap Trick, and yes, Joe Walsh. So yeah, it's a headbanger rock and roll soundtrack. Great music on that, and it really suits the movie as well. Each of the songs, and when my friend Dustin sent me a link to the album, we were chatting, and he said that Joe Dirt is one of his favorite films, and of course I agree. I'm the same. Okay, so Joe Dirt, he's a janitor at KXLA radio station in Los Angeles. And his story is told via an interview process with the disc jockey, a shock jock, Xander Kelly, played by Dennis Miller. And Joe's story and the movie is told through several interviews. Now, Joe, he wears a wig that was sewn onto his head as a baby because the top of his skull never formed. And this this wig, it is an ugly mullet wig, and the mullet on it is about 2 feet long. And it gets a lot of harassment because of it. Yeah. Now, as a joke, okay, so he's there at the radio station. He's the janitor, so he bumps into everybody, and they all give him shit about his name, Joe Dirt, and about his wig. And as a joke, the station manager brings him into the studio to meet Xander, who begins to ridicule him pretty harshly. But as the interview progresses, as it goes along, Xander gets wrapped up in the story, and it starts to draw a huge listening audience. Yeah. And this is how the story is told during these interviews. So at the age of 8, Joe gets separated from his parents and his sister at the Grand Canyon. And he doesn't know his last name. Now, after growing up in a series of foster homes, he runs off and ends up in Silvertown, a small town in Idaho. There he meets Brandy, beautiful lady played by Brittany Daniel, and her dog Charlie, and her alcoholic father. Now, he stays there a while, and Brandy falls in love with him, but he's too naive to realize it, saying, she's too beautiful for me. Now, Robbie, the town bully, played by Kid Rock, he's jealous and he constantly bullies Joe. Now, one day after a hunting accident, Brandy's alcoholic father shoots and kills the dog, Charlie. Now, I'll tell you about this. He's going hunting. He's got the dog Charlie with him, and he's walking down the railroad tracks, and his boot gets stuck between two rails, and there's a train coming. So he turns around and tells the dog Charlie, Charlie, go get help. Go get the sheriff. Go get somebody. I need help. The dog runs off. Uh, and the father, he's sitting there. He says, "Man, I hope that dog's on his way back." And the next scene shows the dog mounted a female dog and just getting it on, not even concerned about the guy. And the father ends up having to get his lower leg cut off. So he comes back and he shoots Charlie, kills him. Now, Joe's very upset by this, and he decides to find his parents. And that is really the main plot line of this movie, him seeking his parents. And he carries Charlie's ashes with him. Now, on his way to Silvertown, he finds what he believes is a meteorite. And he puts it in a wagon and he brings it into Silvertown. And he goes to this guy. He says, I found this meteor. And the guy takes a look at it and he says, Son, that's not a meteor. It's a big buildup of shit ejected from an airplane. We call them Boeing bombs. And Joe had been previously eating his lunch off of it. Yeah. So Joe gets a job in Silvertown. He's walking around town wearing a billboard for the local dentist. And on the street, he meets an older lady who is selling her dead husband's classic car, and it's a Hemi. Now, Joe likes it. He really likes it, but he has no money. So she gives it to him. She gives it to him. And before he can even drive it, before we even get the keys to it, a big windstorm comes up. And the dentist yells out the door for Joe to go up to the roof and secure the hot air balloon because of the windstorm. So Joe gets up there and he's really struggling with it, and he ends up falling into the basket, and the air balloon lifts off. It just carries Joe basically to North Dakota. Yeah. Now there he gets a job at an oil well, an oil rig. And again, he gets bullied by everybody. And there's one wildcat there that really bullies him. They end up in a fist fight, and Joe he leaves. He heads out and he ends up in New Mexico, where he meets a Native American named Kicking Wing. Kicking Wing, who operates a fireworks stand. Now, this fireworks stand, he's got Roman candles and these little snakes that coil out whenever you heat them up, and that's all he's got. And Joe kind of berates him, and he says, "Man, you ain't got no bunghole rockets," and he goes on with a list of about 20 different things that would be very cool fireworks. And Kicking Wing, he doesn't understand. And Joe says, "Man, you got to have stuff that blows up. That's what people want." And they put some lighter fluid in this big tub, and they put some bottle rockets in there, and they step back a ways, and Joe lights a Roman candle, and it shoots into the bucket, and there's a big fire. And Joe says, "Okay, that was cool, but let's try some gasoline." So he does the same thing with gasoline, and it really blows up. And now Kicking Wing is starting to see what it's all about. But in the process, Joe trips. He's walking backwards and he trips and he hits his head on a rock. And he looks, he says, what did I trip on? And it was the tail end of a missile. And they dig it up, and it's like the 6-foot long missile looking thing. And Joe's all excited about it. And he thinks that he can take this missile and go to where his parents left him and strap the missile to himself. And he's got a hammer in his hand, and he tells the crowd there, if I hit this missile with this hammer, it's going to blow up. And we're all going to blow up. We're all going to die. So that's what they did. They went and did that. And Kicking Wing is with them. And Joe's there, and he's strapped to this missile. And the sheriff shows up. Now, this is in the bus depot. And he's there, and he's demanding a list of all the bus passengers that went to the Grand Canyon on the day his parents, on the day he got lost. And the sheriff comes in. Okay, Joe's duct taped to this big thing. And the sheriff says, this ain't no missile. This is a shit container from a recreational vehicle. And the sheriff takes the hammer and hits the top of it, and all the shit starts pouring out all over Joe. Yeah, very funny scene. So they get the list of people that had taken the bus on that day. And moving onward, Joe leaves out, and he gets a job at a fairground where he meets Jill, played by Jamie Presley. And they go out on a date, and it's going to be a one-night stand. Now, they met at a fairground where he was running one of the rides. And when he took her out on the date, he took her back to the fairground. And she commented on that. Yeah, take me to a place where I've already been all day. But they end up going back to her house, and they're making out on her bed. And she starts telling him about how, as a girl, she got lost from her parents. And Joe freaks out, and he runs out of the house, goes back to his place, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, and he says, oh my God, I'm making out with my sister. He thinks she's his sister because of that. Dude, you're scum, making out with your sister. So he says, well, I kind of left her rudely. I'll go back and explain it. So he goes back to her house, and he explains to her the situation. And she says, oh no, Joe, I'm not your sister. I didn't have a brother when I was growing up. So they end up, having sex. And she says, I mean, they were having sex, and they stopped, and she wanted to go again, and he was like, I just don't know if I can do it. And she says, I can pretend to be your sister. And he starts at it again, saying, you're my sister, you're my sister. And the audience, so all this is being told during the interview with Xander, and the audience is just going nuts. Oh no. And Joe laughs. He says, that didn't really happen. She wasn't my sister. I didn't pretend for her to be. So Joe travels on looking for his parents, and he meets up with serial killer Buffalo Bob, who puts him down in a dry well, gives him lotion, just like in the movie Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs. It pushes the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again. It's such a funny scene. They do it so well. But Joe gets rescued by the cops, and the news media, they're all there, and they latch onto this story. And him being held captive by Buffalo Bob it's a big story, and kind of follows him through the rest of the movie. So eventually Joe finds out that he has roots in Louisiana, and he goes there. He gets a job as a school janitor, along with Clem Dorr, the ex-mobster played by Christopher Walken, who is in witness protection. So they're both janitors at this school. They're in Clem's office when he gets a call, and someone had thrown up in the lunchroom. He says, "Okay, I'm on it." Hangs up the phone. He says, "That's you, Joe." So Joe goes down, to the lunchroom and meets the beautiful teacher who's kind of tending to all the kids in the lunchroom. And he said, I heard you got a pile of puke here. Where is it?" And she says, "Oh, the puke pile's over there. It's a big pile of puke." Joe walks over to it and he looks down and he goes, "Look at that. Corn off the cob." And the kids all start throwing their hot dogs at him. And he says, "Oh, good thing I wasn't here on chili day." And then they start throwing chili all over him. Okay. So as Joe is walking back from the lunchroom, he sees Clem pulling all the kids out of this science lab because one of the kids had accidentally produced mustard gas and they were all choking on it. So Clem's pulling them all out of the classroom. And Joe sees this and they all get out of there. The teacher comes out and Joe's like, he did it. Clem saved you guys. And Clem says, "No, no, no, it was Joe did it. Joe did it. Joe Dirt, Joe Dirt." And they all start shouting Joe Dirt. And afterwards, at a press interview outside after the mustard gas happening, Joe Dirt goes up to the podium and says, "Thank you, everybody." He says, "I'm really here just looking for my parents." And he holds up a picture of his parents. And then he says, "By the way, I'm not the true hero. Clem is the hero. He's the one that actually saved the kids." And he held up a picture of Clem and his wife, who's passed. And Clem's watching this from the back of the crowd, and he's like, "Oh no, oh my God." And later that night, Clem gets a visit from about 4 other mobsters who come in to kill him, come into his house. And there's a lot of shooting going on. And the next day, Joe's walking up the road and he sees all the cops and all the excitement at Clem's house. And he goes over and he says, "Oh my God, I'm the cause of this. It's all on me." But Clem happens to be alive. He's on a gurney under a sheet. They're pretending he's dead so that he can stay in witness protection. And Clem tells him that that from the picture he saw, his parents' car was a Rambler wagon, and it was rare, and it would be easy for him to look up. So Joe goes to the local car dealership, and the salesman gives him a list of the owners who had bought Rambler wagons at that time. So Joe needs a new job. He gets a job wrestling alligators at an alligator farm. This is a funny scene. He cranks open the mouth of this huge alligator and sticks his head in, and the alligator clamps down on his head. And there's a crowd watching all this. And the alligator starts tossing him around, up and down, back and forth. And eventually he flies out of the gator's mouth and he hits his head and he gets dazed. And when he comes to, he's just talking garbage. He's just talking crazy. And the lady there, Darlene, who's the owner of the farm, says, You're not making any sense. You're not making any sense." And he says, "What?" She says, "You're talking, but you're not making any sense." And a memory comes back to him. His sister in the car says, "Dad named you Joe Dirt. You're not Joe Nonamaker." And he now knows what his last name was. He goes to find his old home, and it's empty. He finds it, but it's vacant and it's decrepit. So he now moves to LA, and he's doing his janitorial job and talking to Xander. And he recounts how he had gone back to Brandy in Silvertown, back to see her, but she was not there. And asshole Robbie comes to him and reads a note that she had left saying she had located Joe's parents, but do not tell Joe. And this broke Joe's heart. Xander, hearing this, he picks up the phone and calls Brandy, asking her about the note. And she says, well, his parents are dead. They were killed the day they were at the Grand Canyon. Meanwhile, Joe is a star. He's a radio star, and he doesn't know it. And after this interview, he leaves the station, and there's a mob of people greeting him, chanting, Joe Dirt, Joe Dirt. So he's a media sensation. And he gets interviewed on TV. And a lady calls in during the interview and says she is Joe's mother. And they're like, yeah, right. But she repeats a phrase that she had used around Joe. What if Jesus came back and saw you doing that? She repeated that over the phone. And Joe says, that's my mom. Okay, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. 2 alerts. So Joe knows now that his parents are alive, and he gets the address and he goes to visit them. And there's a lot of film crews, news crews following him there to capture this event. So they are his parents indeed, but they only wanted to see him since he was famous to boost the sale of his mom's clown figurines. Yeah. And they also admit he didn't get lost. They left him at the Grand Canyon. Joe's really upset. He storms out. He goes to a nearby bridge to commit suicide. Mob of people around him. Cops are there. And Brandy shows up. And she goes up to him and says she lied to him because she had visited his parents and she knew what worms they were. She had learned about their scheme. So in the crowd, there's a cowboy on the horse, I kid you not, and he lassos Joe, which slips down to his feet, and he pulls the rope, causes Joe to trip and fall off the bridge, hitting his head, and he gets comatose. Now he wakes up in bed at Brandy's house with his head wrapped up, and at the end of the bed are Kicking Wing, Clem, and Charlene. Brandy tells Joe that when he was in surgery, she had the doctor update his wig. She removes the bandage, and he now has dreadlocks. No more mullet, dreadlocks. And they had also retrieved his Hemi from the town. So they all ride off into sunset, basically. That's the end of the movie. It's one more scene with Joe Dirt. That's enough. Now, this movie, Joe Dirt, can be rented online. Price of a gas station hot dog. It's very funny from start to finish, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth the price of a gas station hot dog. Okay, word of the week. Yeah. Last week, my word of the week was yar, Y-A-R. And I said, kind of like yarn without the M, yard without the D, yard without the F. And Kinsme texted me later on. He says, so is yarf going to be the word of the week next week? And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? I made that up. And Kinsey's like, no, you didn't. Look it up. And indeed, there is a word, yarf. And it's the act of throwing up so violently that the person is yelling at the same time. That's yarf. So my comic bit didn't go over that well, but I should have said Yark without the K. Joke of the week. What does a sign say on the door of an out-of-business brothel? We're closed. Beat it. Question of the week. Last week I asked, how many bones does a shark have? Sharks have 0 bones. Their entire skeleton is cartilage. It's lighter weight and it's more flexible. So they can eat shit quicker. I also asked, what color is the sunset on Mars? Believe it or not, it's blue. There's a fine dust in the atmosphere. It's a thin atmosphere, and it's filled with fine iron-rich dust particles. Now, back in season 1, episode 14, I talked about light scattering, and that's what's going on here. The shorter wavelengths of light scatter more readily and are more visible. And when the sun is low on the horizon, the sunlight must travel through a much thicker layer of dust. The dust blocks and scatters away the longer red wavelengths, allowing the short blue wavelengths to pass through. Yep, blue sunset on Mars. New question of the week. Do trees have sex? And I mean, are they male and female? Are there male trees and female trees? Talk about that next time. Thought of the week. Eventually, we all attain room temperature. Think about it. So don't forget about the playlist I got hanging around out there. Damn good tunes on there. And if you want to contact me, God knows why, you can click on the little send me a text button in the episode. I'll get a mail from you. Yeah, piece of email. Or you can contact me directly at bfodpodcast@gmail.com. And also, there's also another little clicky click in the episode, which will allow you to support this show. And I don't mean just by clapping. It's a way you can send me a few dollars a month. Yeah, truly, I kid you not. So, that's it for this episode. A little bit long. I'm getting long on these episodes. I'm gonna have to tone it down. I think the majority of you would more likely prefer a shorter podcast. I'll see what I can do about that. So, thanks for joining. I hope you were entertained, educated. Hope you had a laugh, learned a new joke. So, we'll do it again next week, okay? Bye for now.